Today I had the opportunity to visit with Mikel Berger. I've been stalking him for quite some time. He is one of the co-founders of a private equity group, but it's not really a private equity group. You know, he has about 37 partners that they have this fund, and they're buying small businesses. The guys that are underserved, they aren't on the radar of the big private equity groups, but they're just good businesses. And business owners that are looking to retire, he and his team, they're looking for deals like this, and they're different types of deals. And so it's a real interesting group. And I was so stoked when he agreed to come on and talk about, just the things that they're doing, because they are doing real special things in this underserved market. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Mikel Berger.
Please welcome.
This is another episode of the Defenders of Business Value podcast, a podcast where we talk about what makes a business valuable, learn the tips and tactics to increase your company's value that only veteran deal makers know. And now, here's your host, Ed Meisogland.
I'm your host, Ed Meisogland. I teach business owners how to identify and remove risks in their business so that one day they can sell their business at maximum value when they want, how they want, and to whom they want. On today's show, I am so stoked to welcome Mikel Berger of Little Engine Ventures. I've been stalking these guys for quite some time, and I'm just so looking forward to talking with them because they're not your average private equity group. They're doing things in the underserved space. So I'm really stoked about that. So let me tell you a little bit about Mikel. Mikel, he likes software, co-working, and being a small business owner. He's the founding partner of Little Engine Ventures, a partnership of business owners buying small businesses from retiring business owners in central Indiana. Little Engine has completed 12 acquisitions in 3 years. Mikel is also the co-founder of a software development firm, Delmar, and the co-working studio Matchbox. And he has a couple degrees from Purdue University. So welcome to the show, Mikel.
Ed, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I like I said, I'm stoked to have you. So you heard the intro. Color a little bit more about what Little Engine is about and about you.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll start a little bit on me. I don't want to bore folks too much, but I think my story a little bit as one of the founding partners of Little Engine definitely leads to the kind of the profile that we have. Darryl Starr is my co-founding partner with Little Engine, and his story obviously has a huge influence on what we're doing as well. But yeah, so I describe myself as a reluctant entrepreneur or an accidental business owner coming out of Purdue University with a software development degree. This was right after the dot-com bubble had burst 15, 16 years ago. And there just weren't any jobs that I thought sounded interesting and a good fit for me. And was this professor that I had worked with, Kyle Lutz. We got to talking, and he kind of came into academia a weird way, and one of the few folks at Purdue to get tenure without a PhD. And we were talking about how we thought software should be written, and said, well, why don't we just do it that way? And do you have to sort of have a business to be able to get paid to write software for people? So we started this little company called Delmar Software Development, and slowly grew it up over time, writing software the way we thought it should be written. And so I built a company just because it's what I wanted. It was a place I wanted to work, right? And somewhere along there, about 5 or 6 years ago, helped a few other folks start a nonprofit co-working space up here in Lafayette. And because it was the place I wish had existed when I was starting Delmar before we could afford a real office.
Nice.
I wish I had a conference room. I would have told you at the time. I wish I had a conference room and a table and a chair with fast Wi-Fi. And I was working out of my spare bedroom and coffee shops and all those kind of things. And I wouldn't have told you at the time, but I know now what I really needed is I needed a community of entrepreneurs around me, other people that weren't going to a regular 9-to-5 job, but were trying to, get something started, working an independent contractor or doing a new startup or whatever they were doing. That was really the valuable thing that, again, I wish I had. And so Little Engine is kind of falls in that same way. Little Engine is the option when I wanted to sell my business, that there didn't seem like there was a good option for the size or type of business that I had created in Delmar. So I made changes at Delmar where everything used to run through me, the whole business, because I love doing a little bit of everything, right? You've seen this. I'm sure a lot of the listeners have as well, right? so I was the limiting factor on that business. This is what you've got to do in the early days because there's nobody else to do the stuff. So you got to get it up and get it working. But at some point you become what's holding everything back. And so life went from a lot of fun to not very much fun at all. And I was like, I got to sell this business, but like, who's going to buy this little professional services firm? And there's not enough revenue and everything runs through me. And if I quit, like, it's not going to be, so the whole thing's going to fall apart. So I went into the office every day for about 3 years. I was going to work myself out of a job. So I stopped writing code for small projects. I stopped working on writing code for big projects. I stopped managing small projects and, kind of worked my way out of a job until one day I was like, oh, there's nothing for me to do here. I guess I can sell it now. And then I looked at my business and I'm like, wait, why would I sell this thing? I really like it. I get to work on the things that I want to work on. Other people are enjoying the jobs more because I've given them more autonomy and more freedom. Hold on, I don't have to sell this thing. Now I could, but I don't have to. And I think that's, as a small business owner, that's a really good place to be in.
Sure.
But then at some point you do want to move on to other things. So I think I just got to that point in my career at whatever I was, 35 or so at the time there. I just got to that point a little earlier because I frankly started earlier than what some other business owners do. So the folks we deal with now at Little Engine, it's not exclusively, but our kind of target market, we're trying to serve folks that have a small business with kind of $1 to $10 million in revenue. They're getting ready to retire, or we kind of say move on to their next adventure, right? Because small business owners don't retire on their 65th birthday and then just go sit on the beach and play golf and stuff like that. They're going to keep busy, but they might be volunteering with a nonprofit, might be spending more time with their grandkids. They might have a couple of businesses and it's just time to focus on one. Right. So, so it's the thing I wish had existed, and we're trying to build that.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, and that's what I was saying in the introduction. I mean, it is such an abnormal type private equity group as far as my exposure. I haven't bumped into anybody that's like you. And like we were talking before we hit record, I mean, you guys seem to have an appetite for considerable risk that private equity groups aren't necessarily known for. So can you explain how your model works and why it works better yet?
Yeah. Well, we're 3 years in, so it's still a little bit to be determined if it totally works, but it seems to be working so far. So we are trying to buy from a private equity financial standpoint. I mean, technically we are private equity for branding reasons. I try to not use that term too much. We're a group of business owners buying small businesses, right? So, but no, we are private equity, SEC, Reg D fund, all that kind of good stuff. We're a committed fund, and we do take controlling interest in the business. So we look to buy 70 to, in most cases, we buy 100% ownership of the business from that retiring owner operator. And we're trying to serve the market below where traditional private equity will go. So most private equity won't go below a business with less than $1 million of EBITDA. Those guys are kind of considered the micro private equity space, right? Yeah. And that's right for right now. That's kind of our upper bound there. So we're trying to serve that market that doesn't have an option. So in most cases, if for the size business owner, it's a little too small for a private equity group or even a strategic in the space to consider. And there's some very good reasons why they don't go down that size. We could talk about that. But there's also, it's a little too big for an employee to do a buyout. Sure. So I can vary a little bit with the type of business but with seller's notes and things like that. But we tend to serve a business owner that's, when they get to the point of being done, they're just ready to be done. And they know if they do a seller's note, they're not totally out of the business, right? Their future is still tied to the strength of that business for the new owner to be able to pay off the note and those kinds of things. And so we try to provide that better, more seamless transition for that kind of business that's in the middle, that middle ground there. We also tend to do well in businesses that are fairly light on tangible assets because it's hard to go to a bank to finance the purchase of that as well. So as a committed fund, we can come in and be a mostly cash buyer of business, and mostly or all cash buyer. We're very light users of debt at this point. It's about mitigating some of that risk. So
sure. Well, it says it said that on your website you have 37 partners. Now, are they all from different walks of life, or are they participating in post-acquisition development? What do those partners do?
Yeah, so our 37 investment partners are technically limited partners. They've invested in the fund. They don't invest in any individual business. They don't get to pick and choose their favorites. They trust me and Darryl to make the buy decisions on these, and then to make the decisions for who's going to operate the business. So they are from a few different walks of life, but it all kind of centers around small business, Ed. So that's what I've come to enjoy. Almost all of them have been or currently are still small business owners. I don't know. They range in age from, I think they've got a couple of folks in their early 30s that have had some early success in business, but most of them are a bit older, and they're used to having a big chunk of their net worth in their own private business. And so they like owning small businesses. Almost all of them are from central Indiana, a few in central Illinois. There's a couple other folks scattered around, but they get what we're doing. So I always say I would much rather explain what management fees and carry are to a small business owner that's never invested in a fund than I would try to explain how small business works to some quote professional money manager. Like, it's not fun.
Yeah, I get you.
Or maybe I'm just being good.
Got it. Well, so when you look at your organization and comparing it to private equity, I mean, there's some rigid acquisition criteria. One of the things I like about your website, lev.vc, one of the things that struck me was just the variety of businesses. And it normally you see, all right, I have a platform and I'm bolting on to it for synergy. But in your case, is it by design, or can you talk about how those businesses got on board?
Yeah, so from the outside, it looks pretty diverse. I mean, we own everything from roll-off dumpster business to beer and skydiving, right? A couple of ag companies. But if you look at them in different ways, there's a whole lot of similarities is what I like to say. There's financial metrics. We're looking to buy businesses of a certain size of revenue, right? So if we bought we wouldn't have the cash to do it, but if we bought a business with 500 million in revenue, like those kinds of businesses just have different types of problems, right? Or they have different ways of solving even the same problems, but it's a made up stat, but my gut says like 80% of the problems in any business with 10 to 25, 50 employees are kind of the same, and they're a function of the size of that business. So how you hire people, how you fire people, what kind of benefits you offer, even the type of person that wants to work for a small business versus work for the largest employer in the area, that just kind of different mentality of the types of folks that you attract. So if you know those things, there's actually a lot of similarities. Now, and there are, like, our model has to work with, we say we want every seller that works with us to feel like they get a very customized experience. But on some things, honestly, Ed, it has to be fairly systematized. And that's what we're trying to do, is build up the system so we can do a lot of them. So it's part of the reason that private equity won't go down into this side of the business is they spend too much on due diligence. So I can't bring in 18 lawyers and 37 accountants and look over the books. Now we do our due diligence, but we have to have that process fairly standardized. We had a deal that was going to close on a Friday, or no, it was going to close on a Monday, and on a Friday, the deal fell through because their lawyer came back with like 90% of the contract document like redlined, and we're just like, whoa. I mean, we're willing to come a little bit, but we can't. We just can't spend a ton of lawyer time going all over all of your changes. If you really want all those changes, then now most of them don't get that far. We get to, we can figure that out, sort that out sooner, but it's got to be that kind of process. So we look for businesses, like I said, with kind of revenue, 30% plus gross margins, or, another one that if you have that kind of gross margin, then you have the option to fund some growth out of that, right? Without additional capital or heavy use of debt. So there are just some of those kinds of things that both financially have to work, but also they just kind of tip towards the operational side of the business.
Yeah. And that, the funny thing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say we've done 2 roll-off dumpsters and we've merged those together. So we do some. The 12 acquisitions that we've done in 3 years roughly correlates to about 7 operating businesses. And so then we've also done 2 auto glass companies and merged those together. But even those 2 companies, so 4 companies down to 2, but even those 2 companies, there's a ton of similarities. Both those businesses are basically little logistics businesses, because I either have to get a dumpster out to a job site and then to the dump and back, or I have to get a job tech out to a site, to another site, and then back for the day, right? So it's all about jobs per day. And literally both businesses have, a whiteboard up in the office and, like, what's the rolling target for jobs per day? And are our salespeople, targeting in a geographic density so we can increase, the number of jobs per day? We don't make money when people are driving around. We make money when we doing good work for a customer. So you learn some lessons that go across businesses, even if the product that you're selling for the service is a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, I love that you say that we're early adopters and formulators of new combinations. That feels like your old software days, and that you're tinkering and that in a business setting, what does that mean? And because I'm assuming you're looking at the landscape of the operating expenses, and you're trying to retool it as to, where are the inefficiencies, where's the opportunities. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. Now it's when people kind of like, well, what are you guys? Like, are you private equity? And like, yeah, kind of technically, but we're a little bit like a family office. Just we have 37 families, and the only thing we do for the families are in the investment businesses. We don't take care of their vacations or whatever, right? Like a family office might. But we're also like a little bit sprinkling some spice in there of a venture fund, right? So, hey, okay, we're willing to, adopt some new technology and things like that. Now, honestly, we're learning to slow our roll a little bit on that. Get in the business and really learn it. Don't change things too fast. It freaks employees out. You sometimes don't know all the unintended consequences of changing some things, right? So that adoption of new technology is like, hey, we're going to use a CRM tool here instead of Excel, or we're going to use QuickBooks instead of a yellow legal pad. So sometimes it's just, catching up to, within the last decade of technology or adopters. But then it's a lot. So a lot of it at this stage, just 3 years in, is collecting a lot of data, watching for trends and things like that. And then looking for some of those combinations that can be, but so we have to slow ourselves down a little bit on some of that. Honestly, I'd like to do more. I'd love to write a little logistics. We were talking about how the auto glass and the dumpsters are kind of little logistics business. I'd love to write a little logistics routing package for those kinds and size of businesses that don't need UPS level logistics routing. And there's a few software packages out there that we've evaluated, and maybe we'll adopt one of them and see maybe they're good enough. But that's kind of what it means for us. It's just kind of bringing that mindset. Like, have to do it the same way it's always been done. We want to try to build off the good base. We try to say we want to honor the principles by which the sellers created the business, doing a good job for customers and like that, but understanding that, hey, the world does change. Some parts of it do, and these businesses need to adapt. We're trying to reset the timeline. I think most of the sellers that they created the business with a long-term, view in mind, but then as they approached retirement or thinking about doing something else, they started probably making shorter-term decisions. So they didn't reinvest in new equipment. They didn't hire or rehire stuff. And we're trying to now say, hey, what if this thing had a 10, 20-year history in front of it? What kind of decisions would you make now? And you might actually adopt some new technology because, hey, if we're going to be around, it's going to suck that first year to learn the new system, but it's going to make life better for the next decade. Let's do it. Yeah.
It's funny that you say that, because I was telling a group of students over at Butler that it's unbelievable the opportunity you have for some of these retiring business owners to come in and do some of the things that are just to bring it into the current day. And oh my gosh, it's great that you're doing that. And because, without doing it, a lot of these business owners would just evaporate. I'm absolutely 100% certain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it. When I talk to economic development folks and things like that, I'm always saying, like, look, your small businesses, everybody says they love small business and how huge part of our economy it is. But when these businesses shut down, like, it doesn't make the paper, right? Like, it's not 4,000 jobs getting cut all at once. They dribble and drab, and, even the business itself doesn't like shut down and 20 people get fired. It's just like, oh, Sally quit, so we won't. Yeah, I will just,
Right.
we won't hire back to that. And then the owner's just like, I'm going to stop working on Fridays in the summer. And then they never work on Fridays. And then just do a little bit less business. And, until eventually there's like 3 people hanging out and they just kind of call it quits.
Yeah. They're
all retired.
Yeah. They're dead. They just don't know it, man.
Yeah. But it has an impact on our communities. I mean,
Totally.
In all the ways that small businesses do, but it just doesn't, it's a slow burn, but it's going to come. There's a wave. I mean, I say baby boomers, they impact healthcare, and everything, and small business ownership isn't, immune from that. You probably know those stats better than I.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I mean, the viability of communities and, the small business world, that's what makes the world go around. And, it is a big deal. And to see that you guys are doing that, you're aligned in that same mission that we are. I mean, that it is so important that these businesses transition to new owners in order to protect the viability of those respective communities and future entrepreneurs. So yeah, man, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you is, you guys have a pretty robust development, as far as looking at deals. When you look at these deals, what immediately says, yep, that's a no for me? What are the business owners doing or not doing that just it's an automatic no?
Yeah, there's probably one thing that isn't really a function of the particular owner. It's like if their gross margin is just too thin, and that just might be the nature of the type of business that they're in, then that just makes it a difficult acquisition for anybody that's financially motivated. So I mean, no bones about it. I'm a financially motivated investor. I got a decent chunk of my money in this fund, and for my other investors as well. I mean, we want to do good work too, but we're trying to create some wealth, generational wealth here for ourselves, and that may just be a nature of the business. As far as like more of what's in the control of the business owner is the number one decision we have to make is this at this size of business. Is this really a business, or is it just some dude's job with like 10 people hanging around him that help? And again, I hope I'm at least decent at identifying that, because I was in that this place before myself and trying to come out of it. Oh man, there was a business I was super fascinated about. Made a really niche OEM piece of equipment. They also sold it aftermarket, and just, I mean, super nichey, which I love. I got no problem with. Because it was in a niche, they could charge super high margin. But it was literally like a 22-step manufacturing process. Had everything from, high-end CNC machines to, they were doing anodizing in like slow cookers, because it was really small parts and they didn't do much of it. But, and I think we talked to the owner, and, super smart guy, but I'm like, you were the only person in the world that can understand like these 22 steps. And you could like, well, okay, other people do all of those things, but not at the size, he needed 22 things all in such small things. Like, oh, you can't outsource that little bit amount of anodizing that they were doing and that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, there's no way that we're going to be able to, like, for the business process itself. Now, could he simplify it? I don't know. I think he was so smart and he could do it. So we were a path on. Like that's one that, like, man, I'd love to own that business. Margins were good. He also he had a reputation in that community too. So it was a little bit like his brand. And if he was out and we can give him a good experience and he can like say, hey, I'm passing the baton to the next generation, then you can capture maybe, I think, 75% of that, but it can go to zero pretty quickly too if his audience doesn't move, because the audience was definitely tied to him. It wasn't like to the brand loyalty.
Well, and it's so funny when you have that conversation, they're like, well, of course they're going to go with you. And it's like, well, you've been doing business with them for 30 years with you, not with your company, with you. And you think that we're going to be able to come in here and replace you, and they're that sticky? Yeah. Yeah. Here, you put a few $1 million on the line.
Yeah, exactly. Which is probably also why they don't want to do a seller's note, because they know it's going to drop off pretty quickly in some of those cases. But at the same time, when you can talk to an owner that knows their business and is like, yeah, I haven't really talked to customers in like 5 years, like Bob's really good at, he's got the East Coast covered, or, Jill, she covers all of our large clients and they love her. And, so you got to keep those two, you got to keep those two around.
Right.
And that's fine. I can work with that. There's still risk in that, but that's now getting closer to some things. So.
I got you.
So yeah, that's it. It's determined where the real risk is. But yeah, so I don't know. As small business owners, it's kind of the nature of the beast, though, right? Like we like to do things our own way, and you wouldn't have gotten into being a small business owner, but you got to sometimes put the brakes on yourself to not make it all about you and your small business.
No, I hear you. So, well, tell me about your best acquisition and what made it great.
Oh man, I love all my children, don't make me pick a favorite, but I don't know. I guess if I had to pick one, I really like the tool and die shop that we bought here in Lafayette. So Lafayette Tool and Die, it's been around like 20 years. Larry is the guy that started it. He started it when the manufacturer that he was running a tool and die shop for moved a bunch of their operations to Mexico. And he was a smart dude and was like, oh, you're not going to move all this equipment down to Mexico, are you? No. He's like, I'll buy it for like 10 cents on the dollar. And they were still keeping some of the work here, of the manufacturing work here. So they needed some work. So he turned them into one of his first customers. And then he's got about all of Tippecanoe County manufacturers use Lafayette Tool and Die at least a little bit. So like they're really great as far as like not having customer concentration, but it's just this craftsman's workshop of people that take a lot of pride and value. And Larry's been the guy that I say, we talk about this kind of craftsman business owner that never, like me, never really intended to be in business. So every minute that Larry's not at the lathe or running the CNC machine is a minute he doesn't enjoy as much as doing that stuff. Yeah. So he worked on the business. Like, this is not, these guys you don't get to, over $1 million in revenue and you're the E-Myth, like, you're the baker that can't run a bakery, right?
Sure.
But so they can do it, but they don't enjoy it. And so they don't spend, a lot of time thinking about how to improve the business aspect. They improve their quality. So that one's been a lot of fun because the quality of the work hasn't been a question. I was like, hey, if we take care of the team, they'll be around. Larry stuck around. He's dropped back to just a tool maker. He's kind of that craftsman. He now gets to be just that craftsman guy. He kind of oversees everybody else. We hired a younger guy in, and he's been a big part of training that. So that's been cool to see. Larry's been able to continue working. He's not working 60, 65-hour weeks anymore. He works 35-ish hours a week, and his wife enjoys that as well. And so that transition has been a lot of fun. But then we've been able to come in and say, okay, let's look at our pricing. Let's look at our customer base. Let's, what kind of other services might we be able to offer? Again, we've owned that business for, 13, 14 months maybe. So we haven't tried to make any too huge changes, but we're just talking about what kind of the base that we could build on, because we view that. We said we don't know manufacturing.
Yeah.
In my previous software business, we did some work in the manufacturing sector, but don't really know those businesses super well. And we'd like to. It's a big part of our economy here in Indiana. But via our customers. So maybe we'll acquire a small manufacturer product, manufacturer here in the future, and we'll get to know that, and we can kind of build off of some of that.
Nice.
That we learned there.
So since you're out in the marketplace, what are you seeing that's the greatest challenge that's facing all of these small business owners? Transition or health, or when I say health, like health insurance and things like that. What are you seeing that's the greatest challenge?
Yeah, I think there's the stuff that everybody talks about. Yeah, the rising cost of health insurance, the difficulty of hiring good people. That's all true. So I don't know. I could disagree with everybody else. I guess from my vantage point, the more unique thing I see is that, the challenge of a small business owner today, I think it's always been this way, but the challenge today is there are so many options for how to shape your business and how to grow it. So like that it's almost the tyranny of choice.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard that. That makes sense.
You can outsource it. So I think some folks just kind of just like, oh, I can't figure it out. So I'll just focus and I'm just going to do it the way I've always done it. Right. And I'm not going to look at any new way of doing my business. Right. Well, should I outsource this? Should I outsource it locally? Should I outsource it to overseas? Should I add on other services to my business or whatever, whatever it is, technology allows or new business models allow. So some folks just shut down. And then other folks are the opposite side. They never get any actual work done because every 6 months they come up with some new thing. And about the time they get it working, they quit and they move on to the next thing because there's some new salesman has hit them up, 18 times and they finally cave in and they're like, yeah, sure, let's try this. Let's switch CRMs again,
Sure.
So it's finding that balance, and it's a hard balance. I think it's harder today because
that's an interesting one. I haven't heard that. I asked that on every episode. That's an interesting one. That's good. I didn't think of the tyranny of choice. That is something. Huh. As you look at these deals, I mean, are you looking at the end in mind, like what they can become? Or are you just looking for good deals that are going to provide an earning stream that can provide the return for the 37 partners?
I mean, it's both, I think, right? I mean, our model allows us to own these businesses indefinitely. We say when we're looking into evaluate a business or even get into a new sector, like could we see ourselves owning this thing for 10 years to forever, right? And so will the business itself, could the business itself be around? Will there still be need for that product or service? I say, like with our auto glass, like if we're all driving autonomous vehicles in 5 or 10 years, like they're still gonna have windows in them. You're still gonna want to look out. And those windows are probably still gonna break, right? And so, but if some Purdue material science professor comes up with an unbreakable glass that's actually affordable to put in normal people's cars, like it'll take 10 years before 90% of the cars on the road, have that new glass in them, right? Sure. And so, will this thing be around? So, can it be a good business? And what does it look like in 10 plus years? Is in the end there, but it's also like, can it be a profitable business in that way? So, but we'll look at some stuff in some industries that are slowly dying, or at least kind of just barely holding their own. The whole industry doesn't have to be a growth sector. A lot of things don't die as quickly or go all the way to zero. In most cases, I mean, some things do, but it's over really long periods of time. So, we just want it to be a good business that can cash flow and provide dividend up. That's what we buy the next round of businesses with, and it grows hopefully the value for everyone that's involved with Little Engine. It's not just for the investment partners, but for the employees. That means there's more opportunities as your business grows, to have new challenges, to earn more income as the business gets more profitable. It can afford to pay people more and get more customers and serve more people. So,
I get it.
Yeah, I'd say we're not buying it. We're not a venture capital fund. We don't have to, or even a PE fund that says, hey, we got to flip this thing in 3 years or 5 years. We have a different model than that, but it doesn't mean we're not growth oriented.
Sure.
It comes in a different way.
Yeah. So I have a company, and we start talking, and we agree on price, terms, and conditions. Tell me, what does the last 30 or 60 days before the deal's done, and then the first 30 or 60 days after the deal's done? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for us, 60 days is, at 60 days prior to closing, is when we're signing the letter of intent. So our quickest due diligence process has been 45 days, but I got a buddy that he does turnarounds. Like, he'll say stuff from going into bankruptcy, and he's like, Michael, if you haven't met the business owner on a Friday and bought it on a Monday, he's like, you haven't really lived, man. That's a wild and crazy weekend. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna leave that one to you, man. So we don't turn around. We're not trying to save stuff from bankruptcy. We just want good, solid businesses, and they stalled out a little bit. So yeah, the last 60 days before the closing is basically the term of our entire due diligence process, which formally, at least, which starts with we have a big long checklist. I think it's a little smaller and tightened up than what a big private equity firm would be, but we do kind of say, hey, we'd like all this info. We have a bookkeeper that we use that kind of helps us gather all that data, and we kind of apologize up front and say, it's going to be kind of painful, but just get us as much as you can. Right. And it's a lot in that judgment of, are you working with somebody that's honest and trustworthy and just wants to do the thing? I mean, I know I like your tagline, you're trying to help business owners maximize the value in their business. And that of course means price, but my experience, business owners value a lot of things about their business.
Sure.
It's their reputation. It's the relationship they have with their employees. It's the relationship they have with their customers. And so we're saying, hey, we just need to know this stuff so that we can do a good job in protecting all the value that's in this business. And so that's really what it's kind of focused on. So if there's a skeleton in the closet, that's fine. We do a lot of these. We've seen it before. We've seen people that have personal vehicles in and just tell us okay, that vehicle is going to go with you. All right. We don't really need that. Do we need that vehicle? Or are we going to have to buy another one if you take it? Right. And I was the only one that drove it and kind of stuff that's fine. Okay. Just tell us, let us know. So yeah, we're back and forth with the seller quite a bit, but we're also hey, selling your business is like having another job, right? Or it can be. And so we say, don't, quit running the business. Let us do as much of the due diligence process, really as we can. Now, we obviously need your help to know that. And so when our kind of team that goes in to help with the transition is really from our side, we tell the team, pretend like we already own this business. If we were running it today, what would we need to know to make the decisions that we're doing? And we try to learn the processes and the equipment and who the customers are and things like that. But again, they're small businesses. So, big private equity goes in and they interview the senior management team.
Sure.
We talk to the owners and maybe one other key employee, a week or two before closing. Because you just can't tell all the employees until
Sure.
everything's, kind of all buttoned up. So then it's closing, close on a Friday, and then on a Monday, show up and tell everybody what's going on. And hey, we're going to be the new owners, and here's going to be the new manager, and whoever the old owner is going to be around here for a little while. And you all have jobs, because they've probably heard horror stories and stuff. And no, we bought, but it's trying to dispel those myths. No, we're not going to just roll you up, take all your customers and fire everybody and do that. We're buying this because this is a good business, because we want to build on top of it. And so now some people just don't like change. Some people aren't really looking for new opportunities, and that's fine. So, it's finding a fit going forward. So a lot of the first 30 days of owning the business is just trying to, really assess what we got. So you don't really know a business until you bought it.
Right.
And
so when I guess my last question is, we have a lot of business owner listeners. I mean, what's the one piece of advice that you would give them that would have the most immediate impact on the value of their company? So it becomes a target for something like Little Engine Ventures.
Yeah. Well, I'd say the advice I'd give them is, if everybody followed this advice, I think Little Engine wouldn't have an opportunity, right? So I'm banking on that. Not everybody will listen. Not everybody listens to your podcast, and not everybody will put it that perfectly into. Right. So get the podcast out there. But I'd say there's so many small businesses, right? But so it's go into your business every day and work yourself out of a job, and how can things be done without you, right? I say in my businesses, I've done every job in this place, but I've done it poorly. You can keep your job if you can do it better. This slice of the thing that I'm giving to you better than me, right? That's maybe it's too low of a bar, but that's often been my bar. And so if you can have that kind of mentality, then you've got a business that you could sell because you can step away from it. Now, you can do other things to maximize the price. You can do other things to make the transition faster or slower. But if you're just looking I think good small business owners value options. And that's where I thought I was changing Del Mar so that I could sell it. The changes I needed to make to sell it made it a better business so that I then didn't have to sell it, right? And I had options. I could sell it or I could choose not to. You don't want to be a forced seller, right? You don't want to whatever the reasons are. Well, I mean, a lot of times it's health issues, right?
Sure.
Like you just can't you get to a point where you just can't physically do the work anymore, of what it takes. And then, you're kind of stuck, because for me, it wasn't health. It was just, it was my mental health. We're trying to save my marriage or whatever, right? Like
Sure.
with young kids, this business that, required 70 hours a week of me was like, I gotta change this, or I'm not gonna make it. And so thankfully I had some time and a very patient wife, and so I could make those changes. But if something happened suddenly, you want to be in a position where you can step away. But because then you don't have to. It's actually a really good business. Like more business owners actually shouldn't have to sell their businesses. It's just, you can get it to where the level is the way you like it.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great?
It put us all out of work. We find other things to do, though,
Sure.
Ed, right?
No, absolutely. And I guess part B of my last question is are you seeing business owners that are prepared for sale, or is this just a total, smack in the head of, oh my gosh, I had no idea that this is the way this was going to work?
I mean, it's probably a self-selecting process that I mostly that aren't prepared, right? The folks that are prepared they've got a succession plan in place, right? They're converting to, I've met good friends with folks that, have converted to an ESOP, or they've passed it down to, one or two key employees, or they've successfully, been acquired by a strategic competitor in the space, but they groomed that relationship, for 10 years. And it went well for everybody. So again, we're not looking for dumpster fires, but it's early on here. We're looking for folks that, sort of haven't planned ahead, and they're like, but I got to be done. And what can you do with this, Michael? So at the same time, I'm also meeting folks that are like 55, 60, and they're like, it is really cool to know you guys exist. They kind of are thinking about selling, but I would say everybody asks the question, like, what are you going to do with my baby? Right? Like, well, we were thinking this, or we might do that. And it's really cool when you can get somebody like, yep, I've thought about that, but it might take 5 years to do that. And what if it took 10? So I just never did it because I didn't know if I, wanted to take that risk. Right. And so it's kind of cool, because I know then they're not going to necessarily be upset with me when I hopefully succeed with it, right? Like, I don't want them to have that regret. They're like, yep, I could have done it. It was the right thing. And Michael told me what he was going to do. And that's awesome. That's great for him. I'm really glad for my employees, and they're growing. That's what I'm to say 5 years out. But sometimes in those conversations, I can just tell, or sometimes they say it, but it's just like, yeah, you want to do it, don't you? Like, this idea that I said might come in, and they're like, you still want to give it a shot, and you'll kind of regret it if you didn't give it a shot. And so I'm like, okay, we're not going to buy your business, man. Like, you need to go try it.
Right.
Like, if it works, great. I just drove the price up, but it's a more valuable business, so I should be willing to pay more for it, right? In 5 years when that thing works. And if it doesn't work, no ill will here, but if it doesn't work, as long as you don't destroy the business, I'll still be interested.
Right.
Yeah, I'm still your guy. Either way. Like, having a long view of things, like, gives me so many options. I don't have to try to get them to sell to me tomorrow. I can say, all right, come, let's talk once a year. Let's see how things are going, and maybe 3, 4, 5 years, and like, kind of maybe just informally, but I would love it if there's a bunch of business owners in Central Indiana that are like, yeah, whenever I get ready to give this thing up, like, I'll just call up those little engine guys, and
right,
and we'll see what we can do. Right.
Yeah. Well,
we're kind of built in as a succession plan. But
yeah. Well, I have a feeling you're not going anywhere.
No, I hope not.
Yeah. So what's the best way we can connect with you?
Sure. You already mentioned the website, lev.vc is a great way to, if you want to just hear more of my ramblings, but in word form, written form, then you can go there. Darryl writes a bunch. He's the better writer. His blog posts are much longer and more thought out than mine are. So you can read his stuff there. We're both also on Twitter. So LEV_capital is the official company account, but the fun stuff happens at my Twitter handle is just my first and last name. So MikelBerger on Twitter. So pretty active on there.
Well, Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for seriously how generous you've been with your time and experience and really what you're doing with small businesses. I mean, it is like we say here in our practice. I mean, we serve the underserved. We're below the investment bankers, and it's such a need to transition these business owners. So having a source like you and doing the things you're doing, I mean, it's awesome to visit with you. So thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Thanks for having me on. If there's ever anything I can do to help you, let me know. And same thing for your listeners.
You got it. Cheers.
This was another episode of the Defenders of Business Value podcast. For more episodes packed with strategies to increase the value of your business, visit defendersofbusinessvalue.com for show notes, transcripts, and free tools to start you on your journey. Subscribe now so you don't miss any future episodes.